Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Dominic and I'm the host of the Android Factory. If you're just tuning into this Compose multi-module project here, we are using the Rick and Morty public API, 100% in Compose, and we're building out some stuff here. We've built out the character details screen in the last episode, got this up and running. If you missed it, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's got some good content here. But basically, one thing that we want to cover in this episode here is going to be handling network errors with our Ktor implementation. Ktor is the networking library that we're using for this project here. We have all of it built out in our network module, a secondary module that we have inside the project. And at the moment here, we are fetching a character by their ID, and we don't really handle errors at this point. The app would just straight up crash. So we're going to fix that in today's episode. As we get started here, subscribe if you are brand new, smash that like button to help me out, and let's just dive right into it. We are going to create a sealed interface. You can go either way, sealed class, sealed interface. I like the sealed interface. And we're going to name this interface API operation. So we also need this to be generic because in this API call we are making, we're going to return a character, but eventually we're going to return a list of characters, or we're going to return, episodes or location or just different data that we need. And so we don't want to have to create a different interface for every single network request. Instead, we'd rather just work with one here. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to create this API operation to be very generic, which is very, very helpful. And basically, we're going to define two different cases inside of here. We're going to define the success and the error cases. We're going to define them both as data classes so that they can just encapsulate everything that they need, to basically describe their state, right? A success state is going to have data here, and it's going to be of type T, that generic type, whatever it's going to be. And what we're going to do here is duplicate this one, build out our failure case here, and instead of data being of type T here, we're going to have, let's just go with the exception here, Kotlin exception there, and we're just going to have this passed in, so that we can basically hoist this up to whatever calling code has made the network call, and then they can figure out what to do. Perfect. So we have this interface here to define our different statuses here for the operation. Notice there isn't a loading state. That's going to be encapsulated in something else later. This class or this interface is just intended to basically describe the status of that operation, the API call that we made. And then simply inside of our Ktor client, we're going to create a private, inline function here. We're going to name it the safe API call, and this function is going to take a function. And what I mean by that here is the parameter to this function is going to be a function that returns a particular type here. And what we're going to return is an API operation of that type. You'll notice here that we don't have any, idea about T at this point. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to inject that here into our function declaration and basically provide this function a generic approach. And this internal function, this little lambda, the callback within this function is actually going to return that T. So then we are going to eventually wrap that T, that data that we're getting back, inside of API operation. And inside of this function, we need to return one of the two implementations of the API operation, right? Our success or failure. So we're going to put in this beautiful try catch. We're going to have the exception in here. In our failure case, we are going to return the API operation .failure with our exception. And then inside of the success case, or what we're going to try to do, is we're going to try to return the success case here in our try block, and we're going to get our data here from the API call itself. Just go ahead and type in exception equals. Okay, perfect. So what this function is doing here is it's actually wrapping every single network call that we make with a try catch. And so any kind of error, any kind of situation that's going to happen inside of any operation that happens here will be caught here and encapsulated in our API operation.failure. We're going to bubble that exception up. And in other cases here, when it goes through successfully, we're going to make the API call, parse the response, do all that kind of good stuff. Everything will be wrapped in our success state. And then this function here is going to return the overall API operation, right? So this is either going to succeed or fail based upon if the try runs, or basically if the catch block ever ends up running, right? And so our use case here, and the reason that or a small benefit as to why we made this inline, is we can simply just call this inside of here. And because there is one function here, or excuse me, because there is one parameter here and it is a function, we get this nice little curly bracket syntax here, and inside of here is our API call that we're making, right? And now this is going to return the character object that we see here, right? This old function, or the function declaration, is returning a character because this entire operation returns a character object. The reason we have an error here is because we do not have the correct type, and we actually need to, instead of returning a character, we need to change the function signature to return the API operation of a character, because we're now leveraging this safe API call. Okay, perfect. We have we are handling our API errors in an extremely generic fashion. And as we see here, we actually changed the function signature from character to API operation of character. So now at our call site, we are obviously going to fail a little bit here. So while this code works here as far as accomplishing our goals of actually handling the network call response, we actually need to add a couple more things inside of the operation class to allow us to basically use this. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually create two functions that are going to be named onSuccess and onFailure. Internal to both of these functions, they are going to take another function here that is going to, in the success case, handle the T being passed in, and inside of the failure case, the exception being passed in. So what we're also going to do as a return type is we're going to return itself here. The reason we're going to do that is for basically accomplishing a builder pattern at the call site. So we're just simply going to return this at the end, but basically we're going to say if this is a success, then we're going to call block with data. And this all works here because this in this case is our API operation, right? And in order to be an API operation, you're either going to be a success or you're going to be a failure. And so if we are successful, then we're going to call this block of code here that accepts the T and returns nothing. And the reason we can just simply pass in data is because the compiler is casting this here inside of our if block, because in order for this to be true, right, that means that this current class needs to be a success class, so that then therefore it knows it can cast it to this, it knows the data is present, so that's why we can simply just call block with data. And then for the failure case, we're going to do something very similar here and just change a few things around. As I can spell right, so we're going to say block. This is going to take in our Kotlin exception, and then if this is a failure, we are then going to just call the block with the exception. And so if this looks a little funky, it'll come together momentarily. If you made it this far in the video, really appreciate a like, and let's just go ahead and use this interface outside of our class here. So one thing we can do with what we just added is make it a little bit more functional here. So you'll see the onSuccess and the onFailure blocks or functions are coming up because we just defined them, and you'll see that next to them, right over here, we do have a little bit of a lambda operation because there is again just one function that one parameter that these functions take. They are also functions themselves, so we can get this very nice curly brace syntax, and then the real benefit of that builder pattern here is starting to shine, where we can simply just do something like this. So we can call onSuccess, and if the operation is successful, then this block here will run, and if it is not, the failure block will run. All right, and after a little bit of formatting, we end up with something like this that looks very Kotlin-y, right? Ktor client get character, onSuccess, onFailure, and we can see here the character is passed in, and then so is our exception at this point. So, we can just do whatever we need to do here with the exception. And then what we were doing before is we were actually setting the character equal to the character. That's going to be a little bit of a problem here, right? Because this is, we're just going to delete that instead. And we're just going to say character equals it. Just a little bit of a, syntax thing there kind of colliding. If we go ahead and rerun things here, we should see this screen come back to life. And perfect, we're making a network call there, we brought everything back, everything looks pretty good. We can even change around again what character we're fetching here. No, there's not 1,700 characters, but there's definitely 173. And we'll just fetch a different character here. Perfect, and again, we saw that come through. Great little picture here. Everything is working as expected. So that's basically it, right? We just needed to implement these different data classes here to handle the successes and failures. We are wrapping every API call in a try-catch, Could you argue this is expensive? Yeah, maybe, but at the end of the day, it's a lot better than it crashing. Let me know if you have a better approach here. I'm more than happy to hear somebody out, but this is a pretty common pattern here, one that I've used many times before, and it definitely gets the job done. And then in the next episode here, instead of making our API call inside of our character details screen, our own composable, we are going to pull this out into a little bit of a view model. We are going to get the whole architecture discussion going. We're going to get some very interesting things. We'll add in some dependency injection there, and we will just continue building this out. But now with this beautiful inline function, we have a very safe and secure way to wrap all of our network calls so that we don't end up crashing at runtime really ever, and it's just up to us as far as how we are going to handle the failure situation. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Subscribe if you are brand new. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.